All right, let's dive into a classic and honestly, a super frustrating Android problem, deep links. We're going to talk about that really weird moment when a user clicks a notification, and suddenly your app has this weird identity crisis and launches a whole new copy of itself. Let's get into why that happens and how to fix it for good.
You've seen this, right? Your user gets a push notification, they tap it, and they expect to land right on a specific screen. But instead, bam, a totally new version of your app just pops up over whatever they were doing. It's completely separate from the one that might already be running. So now they check their recent apps and they see two icons for your app. It's confusing, it's messy, and for us, it's a real pain.
So this thing, let's call it the dueling activities problem. It's not just some random glitch. It's actually a symptom of not quite grasping how the Android operating system fundamentally thinks about and manages our apps and all their different screens. And to really, truly solve this, we can't just throw a quick fix at it. Nope. We have to go back to the basics. We need to get a solid handle on two of the most fundamental building blocks of Android navigation, tasks and the backstack. You get these two concepts down, and I promise everything else will just click into place. Okay, so let's quickly break these two down. They are the why behind this whole mess, and they're also the key to the solution. First up, the task. You can just think of a task as a single journey a user takes in your app. When you launch an app from the home screen, you're creating a new task. And as you navigate from screen to screen, you're just adding activities to that one single task. It's one cohesive flow. Now, inside every task is the backstack. This is the really important part, and it works exactly like it sounds. The classic analogy is a stack of plates. You open a new screen, you're putting a new plate on top of the stack. This visualizes it perfectly. It's a last in, first out system. So you launch activity A. Then A starts B, which gets pushed right on top. B starts C. Now C is at the top. So what happens when the user hits the back button? Well, C was the last one in, so it's the first one out. It gets popped off, and you're right back at B. It's that simple logic that makes the back button feel so natural to users. So if that's the default, how do we, the developers, control any of this? Well, that's where launch modes come into play. These are basically your tool belt for telling Android exactly how you want your activities to behave inside of tasks and the backstack. Let's look at the three most common ones. Standard is the default. Every time you launch it, you get a new copy, no questions asked. Single top is a little smarter. It'll create a new copy unless one is already sitting at the very top of the stack. But the one to really pay attention to here is single task. It's really powerful. It basically says, hey, this activity is special. Make sure it's the start of a task, and if you launch it again, clear everything on top of it.
So, looking at that table, the solution to our dueling activities problem seems kinda obvious, doesn't it? If we don't want a second copy of our app, we just set our main activity's launch mode to single task in the Android manifest. Problem solved, right?
And you know what? A ton of developers do exactly this. And on the surface, it works. Your deep link now brings the existing app to the front instead of making a new one. But, and this is a huge but, there's a hidden cost to this approach that can lead to a really, really bad user experience. And this quote from the folks at Comcast Engineering just nails the problem. When that single task activity gets launched again from a deep link, it does its job, but it also nukes every other activity that was sitting on top of it in the back stack. So picture this. Your user is like 3 screens deep into some complicated checkout flow. They pop out of the app to check a message that has a deep link back to your app. They tap it, and poof, they're back on your home screen, their entire session just gone. That's a terrible experience. So how do we get the best of both worlds? We need to stop the dueling activities, but we absolutely cannot just blow away the user's backstack. Well, the answer is a really simple and, I think, elegant pattern called the interceptor activity. The core idea here is to just stop trying to make your main activity do everything. Instead, you create a brand new, super lightweight, often totally invisible activity, and its one and only job is to catch those incoming deep links. It's a simple 3-step process. First, you make this new interceptor activity and you give it the single task launch mode. This is totally safe because this activity has no UI, no state, nothing. Second, your real main activity, it just keeps its normal standard or single top launch mode. And third, inside the interceptor's onCreate method, you literally just grab the intent, forward it to your real activity, and then immediately call finish. It does its one job and gets out of the way. And this is why it's so beautiful. The single task interceptor does the hard work of finding your existing app task and pulling it to the front. But then, because it just forwards the intent to your normal standard activity, no part of your backstack gets destroyed. The user's state is perfectly preserved. It's clean, it's non-destructive, and it keeps all your logic nice and separated.
Okay, so now that we have that elegant fix in our tool belt, let's level up with a couple of pro tips that deal with some of the more, let's say, nuanced parts of task management.
This one trips up a lot of developers, the clear top intent flag. See, by itself, as you can see on the right, it will find an activity in the stack, but then it will destroy it and create a brand new one. But if you combine clear top with single top, like on the left, the behavior totally changes. Now, it only clears the activities above the target, and it delivers the new intent to the existing instance through onNewIntent. That difference between recreating and reusing an activity is absolutely critical.
And finally, just a quick word of caution from the community. A Reddit user named Fear the Cron made this great point. We tend to think of the Android lifecycle callbacks as having this really strict, predictable order. But the reality is, very little is actually guaranteed. A lot of the things we rely on are basically just race conditions that happen to work out in our favor most of the time. And that really brings us to our final thought. We saw how the interceptor pattern solves a huge problem by working with the Android system instead of fighting it. But this last point is a good reminder that even with the best patterns, we have to be careful. When things like the order of onStart versus onNewIntent aren't set in stone, it really forces us to ask, are we coding our navigation logic defensively enough to handle those weird edge cases? Something to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.